Chapter 9. Unseen Lights. Looking out through the large window to what was mostly blackness and empty space, Jake never tired of the view. Each time he stood gazing out over the 23 ships stationed in orbit around Earth, with their large blinking signal lights blinking red, blue, white, bright, and repetitively, he marveled at the complacency of the human race. Each time he stood in this spot viewing what filled the space between him and Earth, thoughts of his fourth-grade elementary school teacher flooded his thoughts. Mr. Faulkner was the reason he now stood looking at Earth from deep within the moon. He remembered how it was around that time in his life he had a fascination with magnets and collected all he could find. Having the same interest, Mr. Faulkner brought many different magnets to class, and they traded like baseball cards. That was simply how their friendship begun. It was the telescope Jake received for Christmas the year before that led him down a path to where he now stood. Just a few months after receiving his gift and talking to his friend and teacher of the amazing things he could see in the night sky, he received a call from Mr. Faulkner just after dusk, a call that surprised his mother as well. "Jake, did you do something at school I should know about?" she asked, covering the phone with her hand to prevent Mr. Faulkner from hearing. Jake remembered being confused by the question and replying, "No!" dragging out his response, now unsure of himself. "Well, your teacher is on the phone and wants to speak with you." She handed the phone to her son. "Hello?" Jake said. The deep, raspy voice he knew well replied, "Jake, you have your telescope set up this evening?" Looking over to the corner of the room where it had been sitting for the last 2 days, Jake said, "Yes, I was just waiting for Mars to come into view." Jake could hear the slight excitement in his teacher's tone as he now spoke. "Great! Have you seen the flashing lights that appear to be stationary in the sky approximately 20 degrees up from the east?" Jake ran across the room and looked out a large picture window facing east in hunt for the object Mr. Faulkner spoke of, wanting very much to be able to say yes, but as seconds ticked by without sighting the object, he had to respond, "No." With a little more excitement in his voice, Mr. Faulkner said, "Let me speak to your mother." Handing the phone back to his mother, who had not left the room, Jake returned to the eastern sky, searching for the lights with no luck. Half an hour passed with no sighting of the lights he had been told of, but Jake soon recognized Mr. Faulkner's car from school as it pulled into his driveway. "Mom, that's my teacher, Mr. Faulkner," Jake said, excited to see his friend outside of school. Minutes later, after Mr. Faulkner introduced himself and his wife to his parents, both of them looked out the window to the east. "Have you spotted it, Jake?" Mr. Faulkner asked patiently. Frantically looking from one spot of light to another, Jake hoped to make the discovery, but after a few minutes he was forced to say, "No, I have looked since you told me of it, and nothing, just the same stupid lights I always see." Jake had never seen his teacher excited as he was now. "That is the strange thing about it, Jake. Mary couldn't see it either till I pointed it out for her. Here, let me show you." Mr. Faulkner adjusted the telescope to the object. Jake stared in the direction it was now pointing, but was still unable to see anything like Mr. Faulkner had described. Slowly backing his eye from the telescope to keep from bumping it, Mr. Faulkner said with a large smile on his face, "Okay, Jake, take a look." Still not seeing anything in the sky that even looked to be close enough for his telescope to spot, Jake slowly moved his eye into position. "Holy crap!" "Jake!" his mother scolded him. His eye moved from the end of the telescope to the section of sky that was once bare, but now boasted a bright object flashing blue, red, and white. Since that day, Jake had questioned everything and dismissed nothing. He searched the sky almost every night for new unexplained objects and tracked each with detailed maps as he discovered them. With each discovery, Jake wrote detailed reports and requested other information from NASA over the next few years. Having never receiving a response, other than an ink pen and stickers, to what he felt was valuable work, Jake continued to research on his own. All through high school, Jake sought to do his very best with a dream of one day achieving a spot on a space shuttle to investigate his many discoveries for himself. With never losing focus on his goal, Jake continued his research while achieving top scores at every class from high school, 4 years of undergraduate, on through his master's degree, looking forward to starting his doctoral program. That was when Jake discovered letters sent to NASA over a decade ago were indeed received and reviewed as a tall, beautiful woman approached him outside of his apartment. "Mr. Guerrero, I presume?" she asked, in a tone of voice that didn't quite fit the person speaking. Surprised by her looks, tone, and question, Jake stared, not sure if he should reply or run. After a few seconds, he had decided, "Yes, ma'am, what can I do for you?" All the while, she stood almost motionless. "We have followed your progress since you first made contact and feel it is time," the nameless woman stated, then stood as if waiting for an answer to her question. Confused, Jake replied, "Followed my progress? First contact? Time for what? Who are you?" With a look like everything about this was tedious to her, she responded, "You wrote to NASA for information on cloistral objects, and we followed your progress. You, Mr. Guerrero, have been selected to be Norcox's liaison in the United States military." Just then, Jake turned and began to go back into his apartment without saying a single word. Who put her up to this prank, and how did they know I wrote to NASA? Military liaison? I'm not even in the military. Stopping just inside the doorframe, another thought occurred to him. Norcox? What the hell is a Norcox? Slowly turning around, Jake looked to the woman still staring at him with little movement other than an occasional blink. "What is a Norcox?" Shortly after asking the question, all of Jake's questions to this point became answered simply to be replaced by larger, more important ones. Often Jake thought of how interest in little sparkling lights as a child resulted in him now staring at the ships that created them. It was such moments as this that he enjoyed most. "I see you often looking into space. Is there something you are hoping to observe? As you know, this area of space rarely changes." Recognizing the voice, Jake turned to the skinny, 3-foot-tall creator with a basketball-sized belly and long-gated head who had asked the question. "No, just thoughts of what might have been. But that is not why I am here, Bakla," Jake stated, moving the discussion forward. "You have recovered the crystals so quick?" Bakla asked in an emotion-free tone, just as all others of his race spoke. "You have been seeking these crystals for how long? Yet you think they have been recovered in a matter of days." Jake knew the Norcox race did not comprehend sarcasm, but it didn't stop him from using such language. "It is within the realm of possibility, yes," Bakla stated. Jake watched as Bakla walked over and placed both 3-toed feet on a platter-sized disc. It instantly glowed red as it began rising from the floor and brought the Norcox up to Jake's eye level. Each time they spoke, Jake wondered why Bakla felt it had to be done at eye level, but decided that was one question better not asked. "What brings you to the observatory?" Bakla inquired once again. Though he enjoyed the view, Jake never wanted to spend much time there, so he got to the point. "The second team sent to retrieve your crystal was ambushed, leaving 4 dead." "Who was responsible for this action?" Bakla asked. "I am going to investigate, but preliminary reports suggest the Simons." Simons was a name Jake gave to the pair of humanoid-looking androids Norcox often suggested Jake use but always refused, knowing the person they were used upon always committed suicide, if not killed by others. They appeared from nowhere and vanished without a trace, but only after programming others to do what they require. Raising his 4-fingered left hand, Bakla used one finger to draw a circle in the air, and in that space, a holographic image of the moon appeared. Jake watched as Bakla cut back the layers, revealing the hundreds of layers and compartments built around what looked to be Earth's original moon. Blowing up one specific chamber, Bakla pulled up what Jake assumed was a manifest, one he could not read since it was in the Norcox language, something akin to an advanced form of hieroglyphics. "None of the programmers have been in use for quite some time," Bakla assured Jake. "Then we have a problem. 4 highly trained personnel don't out of the blue try to kill their team before committing suicide, Jake insisted. I will do further inquiries. Do we need to prepare a third group to retrieve the crystals? Bakla questioned. Having been told nothing of why the crystals were important or why Norcox couldn't simply obtain them themselves, Jake hoped those questions would be revealed once they had been located. 3 team members are still believed to be alive, and from what I know about Drex, they will continue on with the mission. Even with knowing Norcox could not be trusted, Jake understood just how bad they wanted these crystals and didn't see any reason they would jeopardize their own mission. Keep me informed. We must part for now. There are other matters that require my attention, Bakla stated just before the disc lowered him back to the floor. As was Norcox's nature, Bakla exited without any further words. Having become used to Norcox's social manners, Jake had ceased saying parting words shortly after having one of his first questions answered. What is a Norcox? Once again he stood alone, only this time he had decided to try something he had not before, to access sections of files Bakla had by retracing Bakla's screen navigation. Swirling his finger in mid-air, Jake managed to get the hologram to reappear and quickly navigated to an area dealing with the moon station. Access to the program was not restricted from him, and many sections even appeared in English when opened. This time was going to be different. Now he was going to attempt tapping on holographic tiled icons he remembered Bakla using. Prior to this, Jake had never activated any icons he was not familiar with for fear of setting off an alarm. Having made the same selections as Bakla, Jake was pleased to find the program had recognized him and translated information it contained to English rather than Norcox script, with the exception of main icons. Making the last tap he recalled, Jake now had the master list for the Simons. The information Bakla had relayed seemed to be correct. No Simons had been activated since being used to assassinate the Prime Minister of Israel 1995, an event Jake had already been familiar with from other sources. He had not doubted the information, but thought it to be a new area to search for information to many other questions he had. Jake felt that hours had gone by, but he always felt time moved faster when away from Earth. Knowing the information held within their system had to be vast, Jake couldn't understand why his search attempts provided little to no information. With his frustration building, he gave one last unknown icon a try, resulting in bold green type scrolling through the middle of the screen. Session will now be recorded for security review. At the same time, his image appeared in the upper right-hand corner of the display. That's new, Jake thought. Seconds after what he assumed was a warning, 3-dimensional images appeared from a single spot of light in the center of the room, and from it sprang what he soon recognized as the solar system. The images filled the room, and he felt as if he were a god looking out over his creation. Having seen and studied a great deal about the planets, moons, and objects in the system, he immediately realized there was something different when a bright Earth-like planet made its way around the large image of the sun. Instantly, Jake looked for Mars, believing this might be a historical recreation. Wow, he exclaimed as he spotted a planet with oceans, lakes, and an atmosphere. An image of the solar system he knew appeared in his mind as he spotted Jupiter and the empty space between the two where a large asteroid field should be located. Quickly, he looked back to the planet he didn't recognize, astonished by what once was. Walking around a large image of the sun, subconsciously fearing being burned, a speck of light off in the distance seemed to shine brighter than the sun while growing in size. Jake squinted till they were almost shut while blocking the light with his hands. He was still able to see enough to witness the mysterious planet break apart. Then, at almost the same time, the sun ejected a solar flare, reaching out and smashing into the moon where he now stood. Jake could almost feel the heat as he watched areas of the moon's surface turn red as it protected Earth from being scorched by the flare. Further out, Mars wasn't as fortunate as its beauty vanished into flames. "This information is of no value in your current mission, Colonel Guerrero," Bakla stated, just as everything vanished, leaving the room as it was. Disturbed by not hearing someone enter, Jake turned to face Bakla. "What was that?" Jake could sense the alien's reluctance but stood staring at the being, letting his body language say, "I'm not going anywhere." Being the high chair and primary Norcox to work with the human, Bakla understood his expression and began speaking. The most destructive event ever recorded, a random pulsar burst 12,000 years ago, wiping out 200,000 years of research of your species. Destruction of EX-1, EX-2, and EX-3. EX-1 and EX-2 were a total loss. However, due to placement of this station you call Moon, we were able to save EX-3's magnetosphere by rotating this station, allowing its heated side to cool. Unfortunately, damage was too extensive for repositioning around another planet, therefore it was abandoned. EX-3, I do apologize, Earth was so devastated therefore it was declared unsuitable for research or mining. Jake began walking around the room as he thought about what he was hearing. "So you mean to tell me 1945 was not the first time your kind had visited here?" "That is correct, Mr. Guerrero. We disclosed all this to your leaders when we returned," Bakla replied. Knowing he had to return, Jake began walking toward Bakla to exit the room while he spoke. "I am supposed to have the highest clearance there is. How are they not telling me this shit? Guess there is taught history and then real history." Jake continued to mumble as he made his way over to the portal he had arrived in, marked with the number 5 above the short hallway leading back down to Earth. The trip between Earth and the Moon was nothing more than that of walking from one room, down a short hall, and into another. The first dozen times, it had made his stomach churn, but now he never gave it a second thought as he stepped out into the main room of Vortices 5 located in the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. Doing his best not to show his frustration, Jake continued through the base located on the ocean floor, stopping at a room marked Operations, where men and women worked diligently to complete their tasks. Spotting the person he was searching for, Jake hurried his pass across the reflective surface of the floor. The base took some getting used to, since it was not constructed from wood, steel, or rock, but energy, causing not only the floor to look as though it were a mirror, but the entire structure around them. "Montgomery, what do you have for me?" A little gentleman around 50 with a black mustache wearing the same blue jumpsuit as all the other civilians turned in his seat. "Nothing new, Colonel. It appears the remaining members of Drex's team simply vanished," Montgomery stated, surprised he had not found a trace of them with his connection to every electronic device in the world and beyond. Jake was impressed with Drex's evasion skills and frustrated with them at the same time since he had no credible information on his condition or location. "Do a scan for me, Montgomery. Scan the region where the Marines were and look for the same readings elsewhere. Can you do that?" Squinting behind the thick lenses of his glasses, Montgomery appeared vexed by the question. "Scans of the area were done for hundreds of miles and nothing out of the ordinary appeared, Colonel." "Well, search the rest of the world and see what you come up with," Jake suggested, seeing the discomfort expression his remarks brought to Montgomery's face. Feeling there was going to be pushback on the request soon as the scientist worked up the nerve, Jake turned and began walking away while mumbling with a light smile on his face. "Thanks, Mr. Faulkner."